Alright guys, we'll go ahead and start looking over some stuff. So today we'll start looking at the upper extremity stuff. So wrist, radial ulnar joint, elbow, shoulder, scapula. So I have a few position questions and a few motion questions for each. And then we'll kind of open it up for like some clarification questions. So we'll start here with this first question. It's a motion question, so we'll go from left to right. We're observing the motion. Give y'all a couple seconds to just kind of look at that real quick. Okay, so we'll start with the position on the left. So what is the position of, first what are we looking at? Are we looking at the wrist or the radial ulnar joint? Radial ulnar, yeah. So whenever, it's kind of like the ankle, whenever it looks like it's making that like weird side motion, it's gonna be the radial ulnar joint. So what's the position here? Turned in like this. It's deviated, but is it ulnar deviated or radial deviated? Radial. Okay, and so then we come here, and so what position is that? Ulnar deviated. So what motion did we have to get from radial deviated to ulnar deviated? Yeah, good. Does that make sense to everybody? That one's weird. I will say that one's kind of a weird concept for the most part. But it's, if you think of it the same as the ankle, it should kind of click. Yeah.
So would we say like bilateral one?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because just in the notes it says like bilateral wrist ulnar deviation, so like that would like answer those kind of that.
It'll either say wrist or ulnar deviation. Like it'll say either wrist, ulnar, or radial.
Okay.
It shouldn't say wrist and ulnar or wrist and.
It was just in these first two pictures.
But yeah, for the most part, the answer options will give away which it'll be. It wouldn't have both. We'll go on to this one. And so we're looking at just the position of the elbow, wrist, and shoulder. Okay, we'll start with the elbow. I feel like that one might be the easiest to see. What's the position of elbow? Flex. Yeah. Okay. We'll go to the shoulder next. What's the position of the shoulder? That would be the scapula. We'll talk about the scapula in a second. I wanted to start off just kind of with the easier things to see, and then I do have several about the scapula. But what's happening at the actual shoulder joint? Flexion of abducted. What do y'all think? Abducted? Okay. Anybody else have an answer? Flexed. Okay, so for this one, you have to look at the elbow. So if her elbow was in the front, she would be flexed. But because her elbow is out to the side, she is abducted, adducted, because she's coming towards her midline. So she's here, so this would be abducted, and then she's coming adducted again. Right? So then we'll go to the wrist. What's happening at the wrist? She's here. You said ulnar deviation? Yeah, we'll look at the supination, pronation type of answer. But yeah, she's holding ulnar deviation in order to position. But that's for y'all's next test.
We should be in, anatomical.
Not quite. So she's here. She's here, and then she's here. So her hand is facing the front, so she's supinated. Does that make sense? So it would technically be anatomical, but I want you to be able to see that she's still in that supinated position. Because that will most likely not be an answer choice anatomical. So I just want y'all to be able to see that, like, and the easiest way to see it is if you undo the other joints and come back to anatomical, where is she at? Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody understands? Okay, awesome.
Where's my question?
Here we go. Okay. So we're looking at the wrist again. So we'll go from left to right. What is happening? What's the motion that's happening? Yeah, everybody sees that it's wrist flexion. Yeah, so we're starting extended, we're ending flexed, so we have to have flexion. Yeah. Okay, this one's another position one. You can see it. Okay, so we'll talk about the elbow, shoulder, and wrist again.
So,
So horizontal abduction would be in flexion.
okay, and so you come here for abduction, and you come back here for abduction.
This is actually an example of horizontal abduction. Yeah, because the shoulders are flexed, and then they're holding that inside position. Okay, so what's happening at the elbows? Where are the elbows at? They're extended. And then what's happening at the wrists? They are also extended. Yeah. And then we were talking about the shoulder. The shoulders are in a flexed position. And so if we were to add a motion, like let's say we were to do some kind of like plank reach of some sort, that would be horizontal abduction and adduction. So the position right here is going to be flexed. But if we were to add any type of motion at the shoulders, it would more than likely be either more flex if we were doing like taps in the front, or it would be horizontal abduction and adduction. If we were to do like a like those reaches that some people do, everybody sees that. Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing as the hip. So whenever your hip is flexed, you can have horizontal abduction and adduction, right? So it's kind of the same concept there. Okay, we'll have a position conversation first, and then we're gonna add a motion to this. So what is the position at the wrist here? Y'all can call it out there and see.
Radial deviation.
Yeah. So we're having radial deviation because it's here. So what would that, yeah, we're holding it here. Sorry, hold on. So this is going to be another supination pronation conversation. So y'all's next exam is going to be talking about, like, exam 3 is going to be talking about contractions and stuff. So here we do have isometric holding of that radial ulnar muscles, the radial ulnar muscles, right? So we have to have some kind of isometric happening here. But what's happening at the wrist is that supination pronation motion to keep the hammer from falling, right? So out this way, it's a supination pronation. So with that, we're what? Supinated, yeah. So what position would have to happen to get the hammer and the wrist back to this position? Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody sees that? So next test, there could be a question of like what muscles are keeping the hammer from falling forward. So it would be those radial deviators, right? But for our purposes in this example, we'll be talking about the supinators and pronators. Okay, we'll start talking about the scapula now. So we'll talk from left to right. They're doing a little ear to shoulder, shoulder to ear movement. So we'll talk about what that is called. What do y'all think? You said elevation and you said upward rotation? Okay, so, and what'd you say over there? You said elevation? Okay, so it is elevation because we have no movement at the shoulders. So if we were coming up here, that would be your upward and downward rotation. But because there's no movement there, we're just lifting it up and bringing it back down, so it's going to be elevation. Or elevated. If we were talking about like just this one picture, it'd be scapular elevated, but there's scapular elevation to get from here to here. Since we're talking about motion. Okay, we'll have another position question here, and then we'll add some motion to it. So we'll talk about the shoulder and the scapula.
I can't really tell, is this back kind of like rounded out in the picture?
Yeah.
Are you gonna be putting the answers on?
Yeah, I will, and I'll post them at the end of this class. All right, what's happening at the shoulders? What position are we in? Yeah, the back is going to be, the scapula is going to be protracted, yeah, and then the shoulders are going to be flexed. So y'all are right. Okay, so what would happen? What motion would occur if he were to do like a face pull? So we're coming here to here, retraction in the back, and then what happens? What's happening at the shoulders? Abduction, yeah. Yeah, there's always going to be like multiple things happening. So in the questions, if there are two motions, the answers should tell you what we're supposed to be looking at.
So I want to say like, is this flex and horizontal?
Yeah, right. There'll be one right answer.
Okay.
Or he'll be looking for like both, but it'll be both answers are correct. Yeah. Does this question make sense? Like if he does a face pull, just for whatever y'all are studying when I post this, that makes sense for y'all?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. We'll have we'll talk about the scapula again. So this one we're just going to talk about the scapula. We're going to talk about the position in this picture and this picture, and then we'll talk about what the motion is. Okay, so what is the position in this picture? Upward rotation, yeah. You see the shoulder movement is what's giving that one away? Okay, so then what's the position here? Downward rotation. And then there's also depression here. So in order to get his chin above the bar, he had to have a depression of those scapulas. So then, okay, so what motion had to happen from here to here? If we're just talking about the downward and upward rotation. Downward rotation, yeah. Yep. Everybody sees that? And then it would be, what would it be going the other way? Upward rotation, yeah, cool. Everybody, does anybody have any specific questions about the scapula? Like, are y'all see those things and feel kind of comfortable with that? Okay. Yeah, I think the easiest way to see the downward and upward rotation is like, I don't know if he did this in class, I'm sure he did. If you have your hands here, like you're pretending to be on someone's scapulas, you lift your elbows up, and that's upward rotation because your pinkies are coming up. And then as your pinkies come back down, that's downward rotation. And so as your elbows go up, that's what your scapulas are doing. And as you come down, your hands are acting as your scapulas in the front. So I found that very helpful during my exam whenever I took it for 310 and 415. That's kind of a pretty good giveaway. Okay. So we'll have a shoulder conversation, then we're gonna have a radial ulnar joint, or no, it's a wrist conversation, that supination, pronation. So we'll talk about the shoulders first, and then we'll talk about the.
Is that him going like here to here or here to here?
We'll come here, like this. Bless you. Okay, so what's the motion occurring from left to right if we're just coming straight up like this? Flexion, yeah. What position are his hands at? Supination, pronation, conversation in the first picture. So with his hands straight by his side. He's pronated, yeah. So then whenever he comes up here, does that mean he changed to supination? Yeah. Good. So he could have a question where he starts here and his hands are still facing forward. So it's here. You see the twist? You have to have some type of flipping of that pronation, supination in order to have the hands facing the same way in both pictures. And so he can also come from here to here. So if there's the abduction, he's coming from here, there's that twisting at this point, right? So just making sure that y'all are paying attention to the hands in the first position and the second position, and do it. You can feel where your hand has to flip, right? So just pay attention to those questions.
So what was the answer was that one?
I'm gonna change it to position. I thought his hands were facing forward, but they're not. So his hands are pronated. So it's not gonna say motion. It'll say position. So his hands are pronated. All right. Deviation question. Okay, what is happening at the radial ulnar joint from here to here? Yeah. So he's starting here, he's coming out like this. So that pinky side is going to be your ulnar, thumb side is going to be radial. So he's having ulnar deviation. Yeah. So then what's happening from this picture to this picture, from right to left? Radial deviation. Good. Okay. So we'll talk about the shoulder and what's happening from right to left. So she's pulling it in towards her belly button. All right, what's happening at the shoulder? Internal rotation. Good. Yeah. And then so it would be external rotation as she's coming out. Okay, so that is the last question I had prepared. Oh, no, it's not. Huh. I think this is the last one. Yeah. Okay, we'll have this last conversation, and then I'll open it up for any specific questions or examples y'all want to go over. So we'll have a position conversation of all of the joints we've been talking about: the scapula, the wrist, elbow, and shoulder. Just the right wrist. So the one that has the weight in her hand, not the one that's supporting her. All right. What's happening? What position is happening at her elbow? Flexion. Yeah. Okay. Then we'll go to the wrist. Where's her wrist at? So between supinated and pronated, it's like semi-pronated, semi-supinated. There might be like one question on the test about it, but I would kind of look at that in your notes and stuff, and then ask questions on Monday because I do not know that one very well at all. But this would be that kind of weird in between because if we let it down, her hand isn't pronated or supinated. It's facing in, like her palm is facing inside. So there's that weird midway point where she's going to be either semi-supinated or semi-pronated. So in this one, yeah, we're going to leave it at that. Check y'all's notes for the semi-pronated and semi-supinated, okay? Just because that will be options on the exam, and then we can ask more questions about it on Monday. Okay, what's happening at the shoulder? Yeah, the shoulder didn't have any movement. So it's isometrically, again, not something y'all need to know for this exam, but it's isometrically holding her. So y'all will eventually need to know that there are muscles doing work to hold her in the position that she's in. But when we actually talk about the position, she had elbow flexion, she's bent, but her shoulder didn't move at all. So there is no, if she was coming, if there was motion occurring, she would have motion. But for our purposes here, she didn't have any motion. So her position is anatomical. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, good. And then what's happening at the scapula? Yeah, retraction. Does everybody see that, the retraction part? Because otherwise this one's not a great picture for this, but if she was protracted, you would be able to see the side of her scapula. You'd be able to see the back of her shoulder. So that's kind of a good landmark to be able to be like, okay, she has to be doing something at the scapula to keep her shoulder up or to keep that joint back, however you want to say that. But yeah, good job, guys. You'll answer those questions very well and quickly. Does anybody have, we have like 15 minutes, does anybody have any specific examples they want to go over or specific motions that they're kind of having trouble seeing?
Can you go back to the second example?
Here.
You said it was adducted, and I'm like, don't understand.
So, let me see if I can show you this. So her elbow, if she was flexed,
The shoulder.
yeah, so if it was in flexion, if she had flex, if it was flexed, her elbow would be facing the front. But because it's facing the side, she had to come here.
That's not abduction?
Oh, that's what you're asking. Yeah, it would be abducted.
Oh, okay.
I think, did I say adduction?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, it would be adducted because she's coming away from her midline. I'm sorry. Yeah. Does that clarify everything? Y'all see that though?
Yeah, I was just
Okay.
confused.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's my bad.
So,
I misspoke.
I asked specifically like the wrist versus the radial ulnar, because every time you ask about that, I have the opposite.
So we will have him clarify on Monday, but the wrist is going to be flexion and supination. I mean, flexion and extension, and then supination, pronation. Radial ulnar joint is going to be those deviations here.
So like he's gonna specifically.
So it's going to be very specific, yeah. Same thing with the ankle. The ankle is going to be the subtalar inversion to eversion, and then ankle flexion, dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So it's going to be specific, and he might try to make it a little bit tricky, see if you actually know what you're talking about, being like, this is ankle inversion. The ankle cannot have inversion. So knowing that kind of specific thing, you should definitely know that for the ankle and the wrist. So,
This was like a random one. We didn't really like talk about this in class, but I was looking at it yesterday. So the frontal plavicle and the sagittal plavicle.
okay, so that's going to be that elbow conversation. So, or the elbow is going to be a landmark. So if the elbow is in the front, we're having, it's a frontal plane, or it's a sagittal plane, sorry, yeah. So if the elbow's in the front, think about the pole, where the pole is. The pole is like, yeah, so we're coming here, those elbows are in the front.
I was really.
The sagittal plane, the elbows are gonna be way out to the side, and it's gonna be out here. Because through the shoulder, you have this motion coming out here, and then here, the motion is this way.
So even if it was the frontal plane, your arms and your elbows would be pointing forward? Because the way I had explained it to myself in my head was like, if it's like sagittal, like, I've seen ones where they're like bar and they're going like up towards, but like their back is like parallel to the floor. So I think that's what I was thinking of, and then like frontal, I was like, oh, well, my elbows are moving this way and I'm pulling up. But it's the opposite.
So, let's see if I can find a picture. Elbows are going to be very helpful for you, kind of like the knee to the hip. The elbows are going to be very helpful for trying to figure out where he's at and where the shoulders are going to be at. Okay, so we can almost imagine that there's do you see planes or axes? Let's start with that. Do you see the rotation of the joint, or do you see a pole going straight through the joint, and that's how you figure out which, you see the pole? Okay, so when they're here, you can imagine that the pinwheel is here, right? And the elbows are always going to be out to the side because the closer in you come, that pinwheel moves with it. So whenever they're in this sagittal plane, they're going to be here, right? Here, this is the frontal plane because that axis is going straight through from front to back, so that anterior posterior.
I think you said the opposite. That's why I was a little confused, but I completely understand.
Okay.
It's okay. I get it though.
Okay, sorry. Oh my
You're
goodness.
good, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yeah, that makes sense though.
yeah, so that just making sure you understand where that axis is coming in, so the anterior posterior axis is being in the frontal plane, and then here that sagittal plane is going bipolar, right? Yeah, did that answer the question? And does everybody else kind of see that, understand that? Okay, yeah, because that will probably be a question that he asks. At least, maybe not both, but he'll pick one and he'll ask which plane it's moving in. So there will probably be a few questions where he asks what plane they're moving in. So I would take a look at those planes and axes and make sure you're still very comfortable answering questions about that. That's going to be mostly, for the most part, hip, trunk, and shoulders that can move in those multi-axial positions. We have a few minutes still. Anything else that y'all have that y'all are confused about?
I've been struggling to see supination and pronation.
Yeah.
In the wrist.
Okay.
I just don't see it.
You don't see it? Okay. So this is anatomical. My hands are supinated. This is going to be supinated, right? I know he told y'all don't see the sup bowl because this is also supinated. Okay. No, it's not. Pronated. This is pronated. So you can see my palms, but I can't hold a sup because they're pronated. Right? So you don't use that as and so I guess the best way that I can explain it, and this is kind of what helped me on the tests, when you are here and you have a motion like this, my hands are back in.
Yeah.
The palms are down. So anytime you have a motion, try to stay as much as you can, try to stay in that position radially and ulnarly. Because I did this on the test multiple times. So he's here. He had a picture and the person was here, and then the person was here. And you have to have motion in order to keep, because if you flex back down, your hands are down. Your palms are facing the other way, so you have pronation. So just trying to feel where that twist of your radial ulnar joint is. I think that's probably the best way to do it from a logical perspective. If you're not seeing it, maybe it might be easier for you to feel it. You know what I mean? It might be easier for you to see that this, if I kept coming up, my hands would be facing the back. This would be supinated. But if he has a picture where they do this, there's that motion there. So
if he goes up this way, then you come back down this way? Because couldn't you go like this?
you could, but you still have motion, if that makes sense. So if you are here and you come up here, when you come back down here, there's movement. It's very subtle, but there is movement where the ulnar joint the ulna is twisting around your radius, right? So it's subtle, and you probably don't feel it as much in this position, but when you come up, if you don't do anything and you leave it alone, right, as opposed to this. And you can kind of feel it because, like, I'm going to try to make it as exaggerated as I can. You have to have this motion right here to have this. Otherwise, you have your hands come down and they don't move, right? So play with it. He probably has a bajillion other examples. So maybe if that's something that y'all are still struggling with by Monday, asking him if he can maybe go over it again, give some other analogies. We know he loves his analogies. So just being able to see the motion or feel the motion, or maybe even just knowing if I see my palm here and here, I had to have some kind of movement. So if I see my palm here and I don't see my palm here, then there was no movement, right? So play with that if that's something that you're struggling with. I can try to add a couple more examples and see if that'll help with being able to see it. And then, yeah. Okay, we might have time for like one more question if y'all have any. If not, then we can be done. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I struggled with a lot whenever I took 310. Playing with it and just asking the questions and playing with examples. I think that's going to be your best bet to like teach your brain how to see it. All right, guys. Y'all are good. Good job today. I will be posting the answers in this probably by like 10, a little before noon. We'll say before noon. Yeah. Of course, guys.
Good job.